ICQ Podcast episode 241, Simple Hands-Free Kit for your mobile. Well, hello fellow Amateur Radio enthusiasts and welcome to this, our 241st episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Andy, Zulu Sierra 5, Charlie Echo Yankee, an anonymous donor, and Miles, Victor Echo 7, Foxtrot Sierra Romeo, and of course our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1MRB W9ICQ is joined by Chris, Mike 0 Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike 0 Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Ed, DD5 Lima Papa to discuss the latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode's feature is a feature on a simple hands-free kit for your mobile. Well, as always, it's the donors for the ICQ podcast that keeps the show advert-free for you and not polluting your eardrums with horrible advertising, trying to get you to buy weird things that you would never consider. So we would like to thank Andy, ZS5 Charlie Echo Yankee from Durban in South Africa, who sends us a message along saying thanks for the great podcast. We also received an anonymous donor who wished to say not to have his name mentioned, so we'd like to thank them for their one-off donation. And also Miles from British Columbia in Canada, Victor Echo 7 Foxtrot Sierra Romeo, who sends a little note saying, I listen to your podcast while travelling to work and it's great. Thanks for your hard work and donation to keep us going and paying our way. So thanks a lot, Miles, for doing that. They greatly help. And of course, those donations, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors, say pay our way, keep us advert free, which is very important to us, and you can help us out and send whatever you can by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate. Well, now we join Martin, Chris, Martin, Dan and Ed to discuss the latest amateur ham radio news, including success of Australian trial exam and proposed changes to the UK syllabus. Hope you enjoy.
Well, hi guys, and welcome to episode 241 of the ICQ News Roundtable. Tonight I'm sitting in Mr. Rothwell's shack. Hi, Martin.
Good evening. How you doing?
Not so bad. And call sign is M0SGL.
It is.
Or Stop Go Lights.
Stop Go Lights, yes. Shining Grenade Launcher. We've had all sorts of suggestions for that.
Oh, right, no problem.
I like Stop Go Lights, though.
You do. Also, Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH flew back from the States this morning, I believe. So jet lag.
Very tired. But yes, good evening, everybody. Nice to be on. If I fall asleep, you'll understand why.
Okay, so if we hear Zeds, we know.
Yes.
We also have Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Hello, gents.
And good to have you on again, Dan. And back, you didn't make the last one, Ed, but we have Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP. Hi, Ed.
Yeah, hello, everybody, again.
And nice to have a full complement tonight. So we're looking forward to a lively one. If the programme's anything like our pre-discussion, it should be reasonably lively. Okay, the first one, I'm going to let you lead with this one, Ed, because you've spent time in Australia, but the WIA have been trialling exams online, and looks like they've trialled it with 230 people, and they've had some good feedback. So, yeah, I'd like to know more about this, really. Maybe we're going to get it in the UK. Over to you, Ed.
Yeah, I've been following this as well in the background. They've been doing it about, probably 4 or 5 months, maybe 6 months. And it's not actually taking the exam online. At this stage, it's purely trying out the technology where a set of questions from whichever exam it is. And I think they started with the standard or intermediate exam, and then I'm not sure if they've done the other 2 classes yet or not, but the plan was that they were going to do effectively all 3 classes to try it out. And anybody that was interested in Australia could actually apply to the Wireless Institute of Australia, WIA, and get access to this system so that they could actually try out and give their comments. And it appears the comments have been very positive coming back. The intention behind it was actually to be able to run tests, license tests, for remote people that are located remotely. And as we all know, Australia is a very big country, and you could be out in the middle of the outback and by the time you've driven 2 days to get to a club that's running an exam for you, it's a bit of a pain. So that's one of the ideas behind this anyway, where they could actually have somebody do this remotely, but they'd actually do it even then, I believe, from what they were saying, under supervision. So somebody would go out, you'd run it in a town hall or something out in the outback, and then all the material comes online to the candidates taking it, and they know immediately at the end of the session who's passed that test and who hasn't. That test is then added to any other tests that are needed. For example, sometimes you need there's a practical test that has to be done as well, and then the rest of the process follows on. The idea behind it is to avoid the delays that are caused today by exam tests being printed out in a central location and then posted out to a certified testing establishment, which would normally be a club, and that can just posting that stuff out can take 5 or 6 days. And not be very flexible on how long, on the date that it's available. So by having it online, it can be run up at any time, and they can basically run tests on request. Now, this is all being done by the WIA. Of course, the government department, the ACMA, the Australian Communications and Media Authority, have to now look at this and find out whether they think the security is good enough on it and whether it's acceptable for them for this to be done in this way. So be interesting to see what they come back with, but it's all looking quite positive at the moment.
Yeah. I would guess, Ed, a lot of people around the world are monitoring and seeing what's going on, because I know in the UK there is an appetite to do this as well. Dan, in the States, my belief is, and it could be wrong, that you have lots and lots and lots of examiners that are available, and you run lots and lots of VE test sessions throughout the States. Would this be of any use to you guys?
Well, I think it would. And the reason for that is, while there are lots of VEs in exam sessions, there still are parts of the country where it's hard to get 3 volunteer examiners together to run a session. I get that comment all the time. And so if they have a good system that can be proctored by one VE, man, that would be useful.
Yeah. Well, that just shows my ignorance, because I thought your country ran lots, but I'm forgetting some of the less populated states. Could obviously suffer by not having enough people around.
Yep.
Chris, what do you think before you fall asleep on me?
No, I think it's a great idea. I know that you mentioned before, obviously, there's something that has been trialled in the UK, I think. And in fact, one of our members, Alex, recently took his advanced exam, and he told me that they actually did the online. That was actually not an online, one of the first online tests. I've not actually spoke to him. He told me it was going to be. He's since taken it, and he's also passed. So well done to Alex. But he did tell me before, and it was going to be an online exam. So I think that means they have computers. So rather than being a remote online exam, this is actually sat in a test centre, but using computers rather than using paper. So I guess it means you get your results. Probably, I imagine you get your results straight away, which is another benefit as well of doing it, online.
Yeah. Martin, I've left you to the end. It's your studio. You should have gone earlier.
No, that's fine. That's not a problem. I mean, this whole thing in Australia, I mean, it obviously looks like it was a big success. We've talked about online tests and that sort of thing before, and initially it was still hazy about how it's going to be done. But as long as it's done right, proper checks are in place to realise that the person doing the test is who they say they are, and that they've not got internet access and are able to just look stuff up, then this can only be a good thing to me. It's obviously another way of getting people onto the air. In Australia, obviously, I think Ed said obviously it's a very, very big country. I dare say that tests and things or the examiners are harder to come by. There are less of them. So maybe in an online environment, this is going to make it easier. So they used to do schools and stuff over there. So I guess this is just to some extent bringing the whole thing up to date for the amateur radio market. So fair play to them. Well done.
Yeah, I agree with you. So it looks like we do need to keep an eye on what's going on and make sure that it all happens properly. And I think a lot of countries then will probably follow suit once somebody has trialled it and tested it. So that's a good one. Our next news story is also down in the Southern Hemisphere. New Zealand are asking people if you want to get involved in a most exciting amateur ham radio project. And effectively, AMSAT ZL are about to, or trying to, launch a new satellite and want people to get involved with it. So, Ed, do you want to go first on this one?
Me again?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You again.
It's all right. No,
I'll put you on the
don't.
spot.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah, reading through this and again looking into a bit more background, I actually believe this would be the New Zealand's first ever satellite. I could be wrong on this, but from the way it's written, it sounds like it's the first ever satellite from New Zealand, not just amateur, but overall. This project's been on the go for several years, and a lot of progress was made working with AMSAT US. But then I think there was something changed in the international traffic of arms regulations in the US, and all development was stopped. That happened about maybe 3 or 4 years ago, which basically looked like it had killed the CubeSAT project completely, because not only would they then not get support out of the US to develop things and launch and whatever, but also any technology or any designs that had come from the US had to be redesigned. So this group of AMSAT ZL have actually gone back to the drawing board and redesigned this thing from scratch. And it doesn't say here whether it's a CubeSat or not, but my guess would be it'll be a standard CubeSat as we tend to have nowadays. And the reason for the news release from them is they're actually looking for more volunteers, because one of their members is now not able to continue, unfortunately, for health reasons, and some other people have got other commitments now that they didn't have before. So they're asking for help to build what they call an orbit insertion team, which is, as they've got the technical side taken care of, it's now on to, let's go and try and find somebody to put this into space for us, go through all the testing, and most importantly, get the money for all the testing and the launch. So that's a big ask of anybody that volunteers for this, but hopefully a few people have done, because they had to have their applications in by the 30th of June, which obviously is gone now. And the AMSAT ZL committee will be looking at those at the moment to appoint the team leader and the team to work for him or her. So I wish them all the best with this. Of course, there's that nasty dollar question of how to get enough money and who's going to launch it for them. But of course, there's a lot more choices than there was a few years ago, with both China and India putting a lot of satellites up now, as well as the Europeans and the Americans and the Russians. So hopefully they can get some space, well, maybe not for free, but certainly as cheap as possible on one of another rocket going up there, so they can get this launched at some point.
Yeah, so maybe we might see a Kickstarter project for this one, Ed. What do you think, Martin?
Well, the cheeky side of me says in order to get it up there, I'm sure there's a YouTuber, a New Zealand YouTuber that likes making rockets and things and all sorts of dangerous devices. The cheeky side of me says, hey, why not put it on one of those? But I think that might not come to a good thing if they did that. But I love the name of this, KiwiSat. I just think that's just such a great name. I'm not sure whether it's going to be an orbiting satellite or whether it's or what it's going to do. But I think just to be able to get that in a log and say that I'd work through that, I think that'd be brilliant.
Kiwi is the national bird of New Zealand.
Yeah. I know that.
Not the kiwi fruit.
No, I know that, but I just love the name of it, KiwiSat. I don't think we could come up with anything as inventive for our. What do we?
We'd have to have the British Bulldog sat, wouldn't we? It doesn't
the roast
really
beef
sat,
yes.
But aren't kiwis flightless birds?
Yes.
This and at the moment, without anyone to launch the satellite, it's a flightless satellite. So maybe there's an ulterior motive to that. But no, I still want to work some satellites and still want to build an antenna to work them. And I think it's just another incentive. Now there's another one going up potentially, then it's an incentive to build something and give it a go. So why not?
Yeah, I gave some satellite antenna designs I'd had printed out to Matt the other day. So there might.
So you're planting the seed in Matt's head.
Well, we may get on a Monday night some satellite antenna building going on.
I'm surprised if Matt turned up with one that's already built and probably improved as well, knowing Matt.
Yeah.
Bought the arrow antenna and added a few more elements and an amplifier.
yeah. Dan, I'm going to get you to go last because you've got the next story as well, which follows on quite nicely. But Chris, what do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, how cool would it be to be involved in actually getting a satellite out in space? I mean, unfortunately, I don't think I have necessarily have the skills to be able to do this, but certainly, I mean, just imagine, you were involved in either building or getting this thing out there. I mean, and it's orbiting the Earth, and by the way, I'd imagine it will be orbiting. Geostationary orbit is very difficult, and it's very, very, very far away to get geostationary orbit. So I think that will be very expensive to launch it there. But certainly, a low Earth orbit satellite, being involved in that, I think will be awesome.
Yeah.
Knowing it's out there, for people to use.
You don't fancy a podcast project then, or a Monday night project, CubeSAT?
Give it a try if you want.
Just get a very big catapult or a potato cannon, see if we can get out there.
Actually,
do you know anyone with a potato cannon, Martin?
One of my ex-colleagues at work was actually a part of the British Amateur Rocketry Association. So he actually used to build rockets, and even those, I don't think will go quite as high as this would need to go.
We'd be a bit careful firing it up into the air, or otherwise a certain satellite television company might not be very happy with us. What did knock out Sky? Oops.
Yeah. But all jesting aside, guys, I mean, using I think it is the SAS motto, "Who dares wins." You say, you don't know, you could be involved with something like this, but I'm sitting opposite the repeater keeper of GB3XP, Mark Martin here, and quite honestly, we put a VHF repeater on in London within 6 months of coming up with the concept, and
we hadn't got a clue what we were doing.
No. But I think our naivety meant that we weren't held back by the society saying, "Oh, you can't do that. Oh, you can't do that."
Nothing wrong with dreaming big, is there? Nothing wrong with people that dream big are the ones that tend to be the ones that succeed.
Yeah, we just got on with it, and it worked. Dan, what do you think?
It does work.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think about this repeater? Flying repeater called a satellite.
Well, I was a little dismayed when I read the part that it was delayed by apparently some U.S. legislation on international traffic and arms regulations. I want to get a little bit more information about that and write a little bit more about that. It seems to me that goes sort of against one of our amateur radio principles, enhancing international goodwill. And I mean, I suppose I can see where the law is coming from, but geez, this is an amateur radio satellite from some guys in New Zealand, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, and you're not likely to have some terrorist in a field somewhere with a satellite set up trying to work through an amateur radio satellite, are you really?
No. They're certainly not going to try and launch one for some kind of thing, are they?
And even if they did, it will go through clear, or it'd have to go through clear anyway, and everybody would hear what they're up to. So I can't see why. But hey hum. Moving on. Dan, you put this one in, so I'm going to let you champion it and go with it first. But the first Slovak spacecraft begins its mission and performs its first task. So you were saying Slovakia is a country with a population just a little bit bigger than New Zealand, and they've got theirs up and running.
So how cool is that? So the reason I'm interested in this is I have Slovak ancestry, and I try to keep in touch with things that are going on in Slovakia. And this is sort of indicative of a push they have on there to improve their technology in general. And in fact, one of the missions of this project is to promote the importance of STEM education in Slovakia. And I'm reading this off their website, and inspire young people and strengthen Slovakia's position within the European Space Agency. So, this is a big step forward for them, I think.
I think you're right. As I say, it's nice to see another country putting a satellite up there other than the normal candidates. So, space should be for everybody. Technology should be for everybody. And it's good to see somebody else doing it. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think similar to the previous story, get as many people as we can involved, and there's no reason why it has to be, like you said, the sort of the usual countries that do this sort of thing. It's the amateur radio is all about international work and getting things up there. So no, I don't know much about this, unfortunately, but certainly I'm very positive about people working together and getting things done.
Yeah. Ed, yourself on this one?
Yeah, the only thing I can see happening over the next couple of years, however, is politically, there's a lot of talk starting up about space junk or just the number of satellites that are up there. I think it's probably good for the amateurs, and this one I think isn't amateur. I think this is amateur involvement, but semi-commercial satellite, that we get them up now before somebody turns around and says, you can't put any more up there, there's no more room.
But in low Earth orbit, effectively they're falling to the ground anyway all the time. So they should burn up in the upper atmosphere. And if they're only little CubeSat, chances are they're gone.
So you say, okay, you've got, let's say, 20 amateur satellites up there now. Okay, when 2 more burn up, you can put another 2 up.
Yeah, possibly.
I don't know. But that's something that's getting talked about in the media and things about, what's the chance of the International Space Station being taken out by a piece of space junk, an old satellite that's didn't go back into the atmosphere when it should have done.
Probably the same amount of chance there is of it being taken out by space junk that could be, a rock or anything that's up there. They have all these meteors and things flying around, and just as much likeliness anything like that will hit it.
From the documentaries, there's an awful lot of pieces of satellites up there as well.
Yeah,
I did
tell you
wonder
what,
how many were up there.
I'll tell you what. There's a guy here in Ann Arbor. He's a professor of astronomy and an amateur radio operator, and he's working on this actual problem for NASA, space junk. I'll ask him what he thinks about these CubeSats, whether or not they're a problem or not. I'm going to tend to say it's not a problem. He gave our Rotary Club a presentation on this, and those guys are more worried about the geosynchronous satellites.
And you look at the space that is up there, the likeliness of anything hitting anything is probably so remote. I understand them saying they haven't got enough space. If you've got to have a satellite that is floating in a geostationary orbit and is effectively being thrusted around the Earth as the Earth rotates, they're obviously steering these satellites. I can understand, certainly if you've got things that are fixed on the ground, whether it's satellite tele or Earth stations or whatever, they're pointing up and you've got to keep these in a specific line in order for it to work. I can understand them saying, you haven't got any more space at this bearing, but if the things are just up there and floating, I can't see them ever having a problem with it, really.
So on that subject, Martin, there's actually a big satellite company in the UK called Inmarsat that do communication satellites, based in London. And there's actually a talk they did a few months ago, and they actually have a team of people whose job it is. The term is keeping the bird in the box. So basically, they have to keep the satellite in a very specific part of a very specific orbit, so that all the various, basically they're assigned a particular space and they have to keep it within that space. Now, I think naturally it will stay in that space, but they do have to tweak it. So they actually have got on board little rockets they can fire just to sort of tweak it down again, just to make sure it stays within that specific space. But I think the concern about space junk, I suppose it comes down to, we've got these, okay, they're fairly small CubeSats, but how long? What's its lifespan? And once it's come to an end, let's say it's designed to last for say 10 years. I presume batteries and things eventually expire and components degrade, etc. Is the plan? Is it a plan for that to stay in space, or does it have some way of falling back to Earth and burning up in the atmosphere? Because obviously, I think eventually, as more and more of these things are out there, then there will need to be controls around. Otherwise, it just becomes a piece of junk, doesn't it? I suppose, and obviously, what the things the speed these things are travelling at, if it hits something that's not a junk at that point, it can cause a massive amount of damage.
There's always a part of me.
Look at AMSAT Oscar 7. They thought that would have become junk and just didn't come down, and it came back into life because they reckoned the battery shorted out, so it just runs straight off the solar panels. Is that up there 40 years now? I think. Was it 40 years? It's certainly been up there a long time. So if there's that one up there, there's going to be several others. But it'd be interesting to see what the expert says when Dan asks him, because those are the guys that will know how dangerous. But it would be nice if all one CubeSats had some mechanism on them to force them back into the atmosphere, to make them burn up rather than just hoping they fall back in.
Do you not think if you're making a satellite and you're going to make it for whatever purpose, specifically if it's a CubeSat or something like that, so it's designed as an amateur satellite, if you're going to send it up there, do you not think it's quite sad when you think you're actually sending it up there to effectively burn up in the atmosphere as it comes back down again in however long?
Yeah, and you also hope it burns up completely. It doesn't come down and hit somebody on the head or some building.
Wouldn't it? You're sitting on a nice beach somewhere. Bang, what's that? I don't know, it's got an antenna on it.
That's AMSAT Oscar 36, yeah.
But I was thinking
As Ed's sitting there with his antenna, I'm just trying to work that. I thought the signal was getting stronger.
But at some point, maybe after we're all gone, but hundreds of years' time, when that satellite is more and more up there, eventually it will be a problem. In 100 years' time, 200 years' time, when you've got all the satellites that are no longer actually of any use, it's just a box that's flying around the Earth at 17,000 miles an hour, there'll become a time when there maybe need to be some kind of, space junk.
Well, they're already looking at designing space rubbish trucks, if you like, exactly for that. So they're not talking about 20 years away; they're talking about 5 or 10 years away.
Yeah. I wonder if there's a way that they can sort of, when the satellite has reached the end of its life. I know they talk about steering them into the Earth to burn them up into the atmosphere.
That's what I was saying.
But otherwise, steer them away and effectively fire them away from the Earth. But of course, then you run the risk it will go on forever, and eventually, if there is life out there, maybe seen as an attack. What are we doing? We're firing these weird things at them.
Well, it's funny you say that. Inmarsat was saying exactly that. So because the satellites that are in geostationary orbit are really, really, it's something like 36,000 kilometers away, so really very, very far, very, very far away, and that maybe more than actually. And they do that essentially once they come to the end of their life, they are basically essentially fired out into the beyond, shall we say?
Well, the other thing is, and we've talked about what happens to a satellite and all those sort of bits and pieces, but I suppose if you've got lots of space junk up there, and we're going talking in a while off. At some point in time, you've got to pass through a belt of space junk on your way up to the International Space Station, or missions to the Moon, or missions to Mars. You've got to pass through this bar of space junk.
So you're saying we should give the astronauts a dustpan and brush?
Yeah.
Why not?
No, hang on. A new transmission mode for amateur radio. We can bounce it off the space junk, the signals.
Yeah. So
it's similar to aircraft
aircraft scatter, yeah.
Scatter, yeah.
Yeah, satellite
just
scatter.
A bit higher.
Yeah. Right, well, I think we're not taking this seriously, guys. It's about time we moved on.
Sorry.
But no. I apologise. I'm with Martin today, and I usually get into trouble with him.
Who is leading who astray, Mr. Butler?
I don't know. But
exactly.
But you usually blame me. But moving on, US radio hams may retain the full 76 to 81 gigahertz band. This is where they're talking about using it for car radar bits and pieces. So kind of interesting we're not losing it. You said, Dan, that, there ain't much happening there. Well, you're probably right. Over to you, Dan.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great that the AAR or the FCC recognizes that we still have some rights there, but how many hams is this really going to affect? Maybe if they extend this thinking to some of the lower microwave bands, that'll be a good thing, because I think those will come into use a lot sooner than the 76 to 81 gigahertz band.
Yeah. I mean, there are amateurs that do it, and as I said to you before, I know a guy that's told us he's worked every microwave band, or every amateur band he's allowed to use, from top band right up to, I think it's 220 gigahertz. So there are people that do it, albeit a handful. There's probably a handful in the UK, a handful in the States who are really that interested. What do you think, Mike?
Well, like you say, I mean, I'm surprised there's much use up there at all. Obviously, the equipment for this is not exactly going to be black box operation. It is going to be stuff you have to build yourself. You have to build transverters, that sort of stuff. I worked out, I think it's about 3 millimeters, I reckon, the wavelength is here. So that's pretty tiny. It's obviously going to be an underused band, and I know we always say if you don't use it, use it or you will lose it. I'm surprised we kept it because, as I say, surely this will be prime real estate for things like cellular backbones, TV and video links, that sort of stuff. I know originally they suggested that HF was useless, give it to the amateur radio people, and then they found out what you could do with it. Surely this is absolute prime real estate, is it not?
It certainly is.
Well,
I don't know. Do you have cell phones and stuff up at 76 gigahertz?
No, I'm not talking about cell phones themselves at 76 gig, but the backbones for them. So microwave point-to-point tower links.
It's still a very high frequency, considering the range you get on those frequencies isn't that far.
But your bandwidth could be huge.
Agreed. Bandwidth isn't a problem, which is why they want it for the car radars and things.
Yeah.
But I think just widening this a little bit without hopefully not going too much off topic. As we know, the spectrum is limited, and there's a lot of commercial people pushing to get bits of the spectrum to do this and that with. And a lot of it's regulated. We're in a very lucky situation as radio amateurs that we have these sandboxes, if you like, to play in these frequency bands. And somehow part of the amateur service and some of the development on some of the equipment is actually done by amateurs working for businesses that can't get a temporary experimental license to test somewhere. If it's an amateur working for them, he can test in frequencies similar to where they're eventually going to put their equipment for whatever it might be.
Does that not come under commercial use, which you are not allowed to do under the terms of your amateur radio license?
You're not commercially using it, you're developing something. Now, whether you're developing it off your own bat or whether you're developing it for the company could be a question, and then it depends which country you're in as well, of course.
Yeah. Okay.
As to what that regulation applies. But I'm just saying, and what I wanted to come on to on this one is this story came up a while ago because there was the negotiations, because the FCC actually went to the ARRL and said, we realise you've got a bit of primary real estate, as in you are the primary user on a couple of gigahertz here in the middle of this wide band, and we'd rather like to give your secondary user on the rest. So we'd rather like to give that to the car people, but it makes more sense for them from a bandwidth point of view if they had access to the whole lot. And if I remember correctly, then there was some research done and came back and said, look, the short range and the directivity of the signals on these frequencies means that amateur radio won't interfere with the car radar, and the car radar won't interfere with amateur radio in 99.99999% of the cases. So from an amateur community point of view, yes, Mr. FCC, we'll share. And that's a very positive thing in my eyes, that we've got the amateurs then working with the FCC, so they owe us one.
Yeah, sounds interesting. Chris, what do you think?
Well, Martin was saying earlier, also there are no black boxes you can buy to operate on these bands. But of course, look at the history of amateur radio. When amateurs were first, 100 years ago, when amateur radio first came about, there were no black boxes. Everything was home built. Everything was done from plans and worked out and designed by amateurs. And that's exactly what these guys are doing today, but obviously just in a different space. And it may be that in a few years' time we can go out and buy kit that's black box that does this, and we could maybe get involved. Obviously the guys that do this are all highly skilled in construction and design to be able to operate on these bands. But who knows? In the future, this might become a really popular band for amateurs to use. And if the manufacturers decide that there's something in doing this. Then we could always play with this at some point in the future.
Yeah, potentially. Interesting. Yeah, I think we need to keep an eye on this one. Moving forward, Chris, you put this one in. The RSGB syllabus review proposed changes for the foundation license in the UK. Now, so Pete Sipple has written a web page and outlining the changes he believes are going to happen. Or up for discussion. Now, I'm not 100% sure that I like this. I think Pete's a real good guy and his heart's in the right place. I've met him a good few times. But it does seem that we're aiming to make amateur radio a little bit more elitist in the UK. and I'm not sure I agree with that. Martin, you're sitting opposite me. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I like this either. I'm with you on that. It does seem that they're almost trying to make the foundation harder. Now, okay, maybe we're trying to bring it in line with other people, with other things in Europe, with other countries. Would it promote a decline of people coming into the hobby if it's harder? We go back to the whole Morse thing when they dropped the Morse. Surely there were more people coming in. I'm all for making the intermediate harder, or more to the point, closing the gap between the intermediate and the advanced, because if those outside of the UK won't realise, the gap from the foundation to the intermediate is quite a small one. It's not that much more complicated to get there. The jump from the intermediate to the advanced is absolutely huge. Now, I'm all for closing that gap up a bit and perhaps moving the intermediate slightly further away from the foundation. But unless it's safety or interference related, or a couple of extra things you really should know, I don't see there's a point in this. There are lots of people that rely on the ability to do an intermediate license, a foundation license. I'm thinking along the lines of St John's Ambulance, people like that have they do these licenses so they can talk to the RayNet guys, that sort of thing. They're not necessarily interested in amateur radio, but they get the licenses so they can communicate with RayNet. Making it harder is counterproductive. And look at some of the licensing conditions they're going to change. Some of them are, I don't even think they're relevant to the intermediate anyway. They're talking about moving some of the things from intermediate down to a foundation, but in reality, they're only really relevant to advanced.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, having taught the foundation license and intermediate in the UK, there are a lot of people where they find it quite difficult to pass the foundation license. If you're not an electronics background and you're not a radio person, it's not a walk in the park. And there are people that fail. So making it even more difficult, I really think, what are we trying to achieve? The other thing is, as you say, there are people like partners of amateurs that maybe want to just be limited, have a limited involvement in a periphery.
Maybe they want to understand what their partner's doing.
Yeah.
Maybe they want to be able to use it on a holiday or something like that.
Yeah, but don't want to take it any further. So I think we could be excluding people. Chris, you've talked this with me, the foundation course. What do you think?
Yeah, well, sorry, just to be clear to start. So Pete Sipple from the Essex Ham, it's not his proposal. He spent quite a lot of time, and he's written a great page on the website for Essex Ham talking about this proposed change. So it's only a draft document at the moment that the RSGB have put out for discussion, and he's actually gone through. There's an 86-page document that talks about the changes that are being proposed. And he's actually gone through that and spent quite a lot of time showing, to help us, I suppose, help people that are trainers and others to see what the changes are. So he's actually gone through and highlighted where things have moved from the intermediate to the foundation. And from what he's written to me, it looks like it's making the foundation puts a lot more into the syllabus for the foundation. There's a lot more things that will be tested. Now, what's not clear from the RSGB document is the reason why. It talks about what we all know already. There are 3 licenses, and talks about there's a progression between the foundation, the intermediate, and the full, but doesn't explain why they're proposing to make these changes. But no, I agree. What I suspect this will do, we currently do a 2-day training course plus the exam for the foundation. And I suspect, and I've not gone through this in much detail, but I suspect, looking at some of the comments that Pete's made on the webpage here, it's going to make it a much longer course, probably maybe 3 or 4 days of training. For example, on the transmitters and receivers section, on the feeders antennas section, there are currently 18 items in that, 18 examinable items in that section. That's going to go up to about 40. So it's more than double just on that particular section. That's probably one of the areas where there's quite a lot of change. But I suspect this will probably make a much longer course. And I also imagine would make the pass rate go down, because obviously, essentially, it's setting the bar higher. It means the person's got to know an awful lot more to be able to get that license. Now, I suspect what they're trying to do is to encourage people to move up and progress through the hobby. So, get the foundation, move on to the immediate, and move on to the full. But of course, not everyone wants to do that. Some people just want to get the foundation, get a license to be able to just use the radio, and maybe not that interested in moving on. this will make, for those people, like I think you were saying earlier, Martin, about maybe people's partners, people that want to do RayNet, people that just want to use the radio really as a black box and just to be able to operate. I think it's going to put both people off because I think it's going to make it a lot harder for them to get a license.
Yeah, I agree with you. Ed, you said something about potentially harmonising the licenses throughout Europe, and you thought this might be a way of doing it.
Yeah, the change to the intermediate, at the moment, Ofcom haven't applied to have the intermediate considered for compatibility with the CEPT novice license. At the moment, the UK full license is accepted as a full license, and you can travel around any other CEPT country without applying for another license just by prefixing your call sign with those countries' letters. And that's actually basically the whole of Europe, plus Australia, plus the US. So it would make sense to perhaps change the syllabus. If you're changing the syllabus, if it's the time that you can change it for the intermediate license to make it compatible with the novice license, that would then mean holders of intermediate licenses from the UK would be able to travel around Europe and just use this without having to apply for a new license. Making the foundation license exam harder sounds to be counterproductive to me because we're trying to get more people into the hobby. But one thing I will stress, and it's already been said, but this is only a proposal at the moment from the RSGB. But I would very much suggest that everybody in the UK, the amateurs in the UK, go and have a look at both the article on Essex Ham and also on rsgb.org/syllabus_review. If you want to go into more detail there, it's something that we shouldn't just let happen through the back door, so to speak. And it just doesn't sound right to me. I think, Martin, you were asking this question, whether in fact this is actually coming from the RSGB or whether it's something that Ofcom have asked RSGB to submit. It would be interesting to find that out, because it doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me that the RSGB would be making the foundation license harder and hence more difficult to get into the hobby. Changing the intermediate license, as I said, that could very well be to get it in line with the novice license, the CEPT novice license, and that would be a good idea in my opinion. But hands off the foundation.
Yeah, I agree.
I think part of the thing is that's really, if anyone listening to this, go and have a look on the ICQ podcast website. Look at the show notes. You can see the links to the Essex Ham website. You can see the links to what's changing. And you have a right to reply to the RSGB with your views. Have a look through it, think of your own views, and respond to the RSGB. If no one responds, they'll just go ahead and do this stuff anyway.
Yeah.
If you do respond and you've got sensible suggestions and objections to things, you'll at least make them think and go and have a turn around and, okay, maybe we shouldn't do this. And if you don't respond and things change, then really you can't complain that things have changed and that people can't get into the hobby anymore.
Too right. Dan, I know this is a UK effectively story, but do you see anything like this happening in your parts of the world?
Well, the technician class seems to get a little bit more difficult every time they revise the question pool. But what I found interesting was they're introducing or want to introduce topics that we don't cover till the general class course. And I just don't see a reason for it. For example, in parallel and series circuits, we don't talk about those until the general class course. And on top of that, there's now a movement here to sort of reinstate the novice license, the really basic, easy to get license. So I don't know. I just don't see the reason for making this more difficult. I mean, has there been any problems with foundation class licensees causing excessive interference or, doing bad things on the air?
No more
if
than
not,
there is
why
of
make it
full
hard?
licenses for that matter.
Yeah, no, they're not particularly. Foundation licenses are usually pretty well behaved, and as Martin said, there's one or two full licensees around here that could do with learning from the foundation guys.
Could do with going and sitting the foundation course, I think, some of them.
Yeah.
Well, so, and so that brings up the idea that you can't test competency anyway, right? I mean, just because they pass a test doesn't mean they're competent. So making the test harder is probably not going to create a class or a group of more technically competent amateur radio operators.
Oh, of course not. The other thing I always say about exams and whatever it is, okay, when you go into an exam, you get given a page with all your formulas and stuff. They don't tell you necessarily what they relate to, but they give you the formulas and things. I would argue that a lot of these things, and okay, there are certain things that you need to know. You need to know basic safety. You need to know how not to cause interference, that sort of stuff. But if you're building something, do you actually need to know off the top of your head what this particular thing is? Or more to the point, do you just need to know enough to go and look it up?
Yeah.
So,
right.
Why would they give you the formulas if they don't tell you what they are? Well, why not? Because if I'm going to have to try and work this out when I'm building something or whether I'm applying what I'm learning, I'm just going to go and look in my book, or I'm going to Google it, or I'm going to look at the sheet of that. There's the formula for that. No problem. I can work it out. Is it not about you putting that into practice rather than knowing it off the top of your head?
Right. And here we don't even give them the equations, not any sheet of equations at all.
Yeah. I mean, when I did my exam as well, and I'm sure it'd be the same with Ed, we didn't get equations. We had to remember them. But you can only pass the exam that's valid at the time. There's two things I think I worry about this is by making the foundation license more difficult, we would appear to the general public as being as elitist lot of anoraks that are trying to keep them out of the hobby, which I think is a bit of a shame, really, because we've done so hard over the last 10, 12 years trying to get more people into the hobby, trying to promote the hobby, and now we're trying to exclude people from the hobby, which is a bit of a worry. Number two, if you exclude people from the hobby or reduce the number of people coming in, it means that two things are going to happen with the manufacturers. The manufacturers are not going to produce so many different model radios, because they won't put the development work in if they can't sell them, and the price will go up, because if you've only got a limited run, you're going to stick the price up. So kind of, looking at it purely on a commercial basis, excluding people from the hobby is not good for us amateurs. Long-term licenses.
If anything, they should be making it easier.
Yeah, well, Dan was saying in the States they're potentially looking at an entry-level license. So, yeah, I think it's interesting. I'll agree with you that the intermediate should be more difficult. Not to stop people.
I'm not saying it should be necessarily difficult, but the gap between intermediate and advanced, maybe the intermediate should include more, or they should close that gap up.
Yeah, I agree. But the thing is, once you've got your foundation license, you're on the air, you're learning, you can operate, you can be part of a group.
Yes. Moving
to intermediate, if you fail your intermediate or your general class in the States, you don't stop being a radio amateur. And the thing is that so you could mess with that one and improve that one or close the gap. But moving the foundation license, which is the equivalent to your technician, Dan, he to me is wrong. So anyway, I'll get off my soapbox now. Okay.
I wonder why you brought that with you.
I did. You're not supposed to tell anybody. I've been standing. He had to raise the microphone. Okay, we'll stop messing around. The last news story in for today, quite a nice one. A girl guide gets an amateur radio license. Northern Echo reports a 14-year-old Madeline got her amateur radio license after a radio club gave a talk to the Girl Guides group. Now, years ago, people used to do lots of that. So Girl Guides and Scouting used to be very, very active in amateur radio. Are they still active in the States down on amateur radio, the Guides and the Scouts?
Oh, for sure. And we do radio merit badge classes here, maybe once a year or so. And my little story about this is about a month ago, we participated in a local maker fair. And our booth was visited by the head of the local Girl Scouts. We call them Girl Scouts here. Yeah. And I got an email last week from that woman, and she asked for our participation in a Girl Scout event that was coming up sometime in August, I think. And unfortunately, she's a little too far away for me to for me to participate personally, but I've put her in touch with some of the local clubs around that area, and some of them have expressed some interest. So, it's still a going thing here.
Yeah, and once again, it's good because it shows amateur radio in a good light in youngsters' eyes as well. So I kind of like that one. Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, so as we know, we as a club, we actually use the Scout facilities in our local area, for our club meetings, and we do work very closely with the Scouts. So I think, very good for her to get her license. I think it's also great that it's the local media who picked up on it and publicising that, which may also spark some interest in that area. But yeah, secondly, I think there is definitely a connection between the Scouts and the Guides and amateur radio. As we know in our club, we use the Scouts hall for our meetings. We also get involved in a number of their activities. We've got a number of Scouts that have come through our training courses over the years that have got their own licence. We help out with things like Joe to the Jamboree on the air every year, or whenever whenever they put it on. So we do work very closely, and a number of the Scout leaders themselves also have amateur radio licenses, so they're also very heavily involved in both scouting and in radio. So I think there's a very close connection there, and I think it's a good one. I think it's part of the way that our hobby continues. We do get people coming through, the courses, and a part of that is through Scouts.
Yeah, fine on that, and I agree with you. Ed, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I actually got into amateur radio through my brother, who got into amateur radio through the Scouts. So, without the Scouts being involved with amateur radio back many years ago, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you about amateur radio. So I think it's actually a very important link between the Scouts and the Guides associations and amateur radio clubs, and one that probably should be taken care of and improved and expanded, especially now if we look at it this day and age where we're getting a lot more portable operation in amateur radio becoming more popular. And, scouting is all about the outdoors as well. So, there's I would hope in the future we'll see even more involvement between the two organisations.
Yeah, I agree with you. Martin, your studio, but have the last word in the news on this one.
Well, anybody getting their hand license is obviously a good thing. Girl guy getting the license at 14, Madeline Dale, congratulations to you. Young people, definitely the future of this hobby. Anybody out there thinking of taking their licenses, there's no excuse not to do it. If a 14-year-old girl can do that, then, anybody can go ahead and do this. Why not? Good luck to her. So I know we've done stuff with the Scouts. So I've done communications badges and things with local Brownie group, but that was nothing more than sending a message over a walkie-talkie. It's effectively just a UHF PMR radio, and we had to make radio adverts. So slightly different, but I'm sure some of the older groups would absolutely love to get involved with ham radio, that sort of stuff. So
I'm sure they would if they know about it.
Yeah, but again, a lot of it is a case of people don't always know about it. Somebody walked past my car the other day, saw two large aerials on the back, and I was sitting in the car at the time and they said, "Oh, large aerials," and then someone said, "Oh yeah, it's all CB, it's like truckers," and that just proves that people don't know. Yeah,
they normally refer to your car as the porcupine, don't they?
They do, yeah. Mind you, big black car, two large aerials on the back. An awful lot of careful drivers around me, especially when I've been to a site and I've still got my high-vis jacket on. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. So all in all, I think it's a really good one. Congratulations, Madeline.
Yeah.
And I hope you enjoy your time in the hobby as well. Okay, well, that concludes the news stories for today. Been quite lively. Guys, I'm going to run around the table and ask you what you've been up to since the last episode. Dan, what have you been up to since the last episode?
Well, 2 weeks ago, we had our field day here. And I tell you, we had a total blast here in Ann Arbor. The weather was perfect. The bands were in good condition. We used an IC 7300 at the GOTA station, the GOTA station, by the way, is short for Get on the Air, and it's for newcomers. And I was the head coach for the GOTA station. And we used an IC 7300. That was a blast. And to top it all off, we had the best dinner you could ever have. One of our guys barbecued up some chicken and some pork and all the sides, and we ate like kings. So it was just a total great weekend.
Sounds great.
I don't remember getting an invite to that. Do you, Martin?
No, we didn't get an invite.
Well, you guys are all invited next year.
No problems there. It did sound fun, though. And as I say, we weren't around that Saturday anyway. But maybe Chris will tell you what we were up to that Saturday. But lots were going on in the UK with our little group.
And if I could, just a quick one. So this Get on the Air station, we actually had 11 different operators, some of them not licensed, and we made a total of 72 contacts, which was, I don't know if it was a record for us, but it was pretty good. So we got a lot of new hams on the air, and some people that weren't licensed, and that was a great thing too.
Yeah, and this is the thing that I like about you go-to stations is you get people on the air, somebody turns up, wants to find out what you're doing. You let them have a bit of a go, you whet their appetite, get them excited, get them interested. Whereas in the UK, we've always been, no, you're not allowed to touch that. So,
oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
Where we go all out on that kind of thing.
Yeah, so I think in your part of the world, it's a far better system. But anyway, that'll get me off another soapbox.
So let me just ask you one question, Dan. Now that you've used a 7300, and I saw your tweet about this, and you've experienced the Spectrum scope. And any plans to upgrade at home and get a rig with a scope on it?
Well, so actually, I've got several things in the works. So I have a K3. And I plan to, and I have a 50-watt amplifier now for it too. I plan to hook that all up and then do the Spectrum display on my computer.
Okay.
And at Dayton, I also bought another different SDR radio. So that's sort of in the plans to get that all set up and working.
So now it's just an incentive to get it working now, isn't it?
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I should have actually just bought a 7300, then it would have been all in one package. But I decided to go cheap.
No.
K3 is a good radio.
Yeah. And equally, Dan, we're amateurs. You know, we never
we don't spend money.
You don't spend money, and you always do it the difficult way. You know, we're amateurs.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll tell you another reason why, though. So while that was very cool, that display was very cool, it was a little bit small. You know, it's not a big display.
I think you can plug it into a bigger screen. I might be wrong. I think.
Well, right.
No, you can't. You can't. But the next model, the IC7610, that Martin and myself will be looking at first hand in Friedrichshafen in a couple of weeks' time, you can stick an external HDMI or DVI screen in the back of it. It's also got a larger screen anyway for its LCD. So
it also costs $3,000.
It's more expensive. That's right. Well, it's basically the 7300 is the entry level, and the 7610 is supposed to be the mid level. Although I suspect it's going to compete with the top level ICOMs.
Yeah.
Right. So, anyway, it was a nice radio to use, and I got great signal reports, great audio reports, and it was very clean. It worked very nicely in field day and a multiple transmitter setup. So it's a great radio, though.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, over to you then, Ed. What have you been up to?
Yeah, well, actually, I'd forgotten about this, but when Dan mentioned field day, I got invited along to a local club's field day, which just happened to be on the same weekend as the US field day. Not that we worked anybody over there, and I took my 7300 along. First time out portable. Normally just sits in the shack here, and took it along to show it off to about 3 or 4 people in the club there. They were all sort of aghast with the Spectrum display, the waterfall and everything, and also that it was so small. So it's a balance, isn't it? I mean, you'd like a bigger display, but then the case is bigger. But I think it went quite well. That was the one thing I did. The other thing is part of my portable operations for SOTA. I actually use a Yaesu FT817 plus an amplifier, which is a vastly modified Ramsey amplifier, giving me about 25 or 30 watts out. And it just started blowing transistors again. It did it maybe a year ago. So starting to get to a stage. I've repaired it and it's working again. But at the same time, I thought, this has been so hacked about so many times that the metal plating on the PC board is coming off because I've been soldering and desoldering these transistors. That I decided to build a new one. And looking around in eBay, I found a kit of parts for a 70-watt HF, so 80 meters through 10 meters amplifier at €16 from China, including shipping. So I thought that price can't go wrong. Get that, build that. I also ordered a separate set of low pass filters from a different company because the amplifier circuit itself didn't have that in there, so you've got to have low pass filters, stop harmonics and everything else. And the thing arrived like a couple of days ago, the kit, and it looks very good. The PC board is very professional, and the parts are all there. They even sent some spare parts, so that was quite impressive for €16. Haven't got the low pass filter kit yet, but I'm waiting for that so I can get it all mounted in the case properly. And then the other thing, not directly on radio, but affecting my radio, is I've just changed my Shack PC. And after a week of swapping over from the old PC, I'm still installing programs I suddenly find I've forgotten I had installed before. So I was glad to find that Skype at least was working for this evening's recording.
Yeah.
That was about it. So that's actually, what would that be? That would be then 2 months, I guess, because I missed the last one.
Well, 4 weeks, yeah. I know what you mean, Ed. I replaced the hard drive in one of my main desktop computer at home, and I'm still recovering from things that, even though I backed it up, I'm thinking, oh yeah, I installed this application, that application, so I'll get there eventually. Chris, you've been on holiday, haven't you?
I have. So before we went on holiday, as we know, we went up to Bletchley Park, didn't we? Have a look around there. So I'm not going to steal your thunder. I'm going to let you talk about that later on because I know that was a number of us that went to that. So I'm going to let you discuss that. Other than we had a great time and we saw lots of things that we went there for the second time, and we saw lots of new things that we didn't see the first time. So I'll let you cover that one later. Yeah, I've literally just come back today from the States. Flew in this morning. So I've been over to Maryland and to New York. And then while I was in Maryland in Ocean City, I did actually work emails and did it through Echolink. I actually connected the local repeater there, which is the N3HF repeater in Ocean City, through to the GB3NS repeater in South London, Martin, and we had a chat, didn't we?
We certainly did, and it worked very, very well. You phoned me up and we were nattering on the phone for a few minutes, and then you said, I don't know, let's set up Echolink call. So we set up an Echolink call and worked quite well. In fact, worked very, very well. And the Muppet the Muppet pirate that keeps antagonising people on GB3NS, and I noticed was on LW today, wasn't around. So we had an uninterrupted conversation.
Yeah, we probably had half an hour chatting with me on Echolink. So that was good, and that was obviously repeater to repeater. So that was me linking the repeater in Ocean City across the repeater in London. So that was quite good. Apart from that, I haven't done a huge amount of radio. I've done the odd bit on HF, but haven't done anything spectacular, I'm afraid.
All right. Well, at least you had been doing bits and pieces.
I did try it while I was in the States. I did actually use my US call sign, which is good. Put it on the air a couple of times. Yeah. And I did put a few calls out on repeaters in both Maryland and also in New York. But apart from talking to you, Martin, I'm afraid it's very, very quiet. In fact, I was actually listening to the repeater all day in Maryland, had the handheld going, and didn't hear a single QSA going on, unfortunately.
Yeah. Maybe it's a bit of a shame, but hey hum, at least you had had a long conversation with me. You could have done that at home, but we did it via Echolink to the States, so that was good fun. So good one, Chris. Martin, what have you been up to?
Probably not as much as anybody else, actually. I mean, I've been playing with D-Star, as I always play with D-Star. I do love D-Star. A fair bit of Fusion as well, just having a play around with there. We sort of decided in the end we were going to leave XP connected to the CQ UK chat room, mainly because people, all the analog users in the club complained, and they're all moaning, oh, what's this digital data going through? I can't get on and use analog. And so we thought, okay then, so we switched off the permanent the permanent connectivity to the chat room, and we just left it so people could still connect it up if they wanted to, but they could also still use it as analog, and no one used it at all. It was literally just dead as a dodo. So we switched the Fusion, the CQ UK, back onto that box, and it's getting quite a lot of use. It's getting quite a lot of use both remotely and locally with Fusion. And, of course, analog users can still use it if they program their radios up right to have CTCSS on receive. So, fair amount of Fusion. went up on the Belfast a couple of weeks ago. That was good fun there. And I think that's radio-wise. I think that's pretty much it. But with you going to Friedrichshafen in a couple of weeks, I know you're taking Mrs. B with you. But if you end up buying any new toys that you need to smuggle home, the trick you need to do here, Martin, is put it on the shelf. And when she questions you about it, and this goes for anybody that's going to Friedrichshafen, you say, "That old thing, that's been there for years."
No,
just run with me on that one.
Yeah,
Same goes for you, Dan, if you're buying a new radio.
Yeah. You see, I don't have that problem. I'm the reverse. I sit and look at something and go, no, do I really want it? And I am an R. And Mrs. B will say, oh, for God's sake, buy it. I tend to be harder on myself than anybody else, and I'm quite happy about it. But I don't have problems. In the past, say my daughter and Carol both bought me the FT450D. So you know, you need new HF radio. There's the money. Just go and buy it.
Yeah.
Stop fiddling around with the rubbish and get something decent. And thank you very much. So I don't have that problem either.
So let's turn the tables around then, Martin. What have you been doing in radio in the last 2 weeks?
Oh, what have I been doing? Well, I'm going to apologise to Phil in advance at the moment because, and I'll mention your call sign at the end in the 73 section. I was on Fusion Monday afternoon.
Mm-hmm. I saw you connected. I could hear half of a conversation because I logged on through my phone, but I can only hear the remote party through the phone.
Yeah. I spent about half an hour talking to Phil, and Phil was in the States, and Phil was an ICQ listener. So congratulations. He said nice things about all of you guys.
Thank you, Phil.
And so that was good, and we had a long conversation. He came up and he went, M1MRB, I know that call sign. And he looked me up on Q. I said, "Is you, isn't it?" I went, yeah, I'm guilty as charged. And we had quite a chat about various amateur radio things and the podcast and how Martin leads me astray and all those sort of things. So that was very, very good. So Fusion is working very, very well. And as Martin said, I was putting calls through it and nobody was coming back on analog. In fact, I think I called pretty regularly for pretty much a week, and the person who lives about a mile from me came back to me about a week later and on one of the calls, and that was about as much as I got. Now, on the way home from work, I tend to work people in Northern Ireland, in Scotland, in the West Country, all via Fusion, so it's getting use anyway. As I say, Chris and I did Echo Link, so I can tick that one off my list. Yeah, Chris, Chris and I went to Bletchley Park with some of the other guys from the Sutton and Cheam Club, and also the Cats Club were there. Bletchley Park, really interesting place to go. It's where the code breakers were in World War II when they broke the code, the Enigma code, and we had a really good demonstration. We went round to the computer museum, which is not on site, but it's only like a 2-minute walk round the corner to a separate museum where they've got the bomb and Colossus there. And they were actually, they walk you through how it came in from radio signals right through to decoding, and quite a good lecture on that. That's really, really good. And it turns out that they were saying that GCHQ, our security people, fairly regularly still send them encrypted messages and say, try and break the code on that one. Mm. And they reckon they can do it even with this old 1940s computer or rebuild of a 1940s computer. They can usually do it within a day. So it works very, very well. So that was fun. I've got to say, I enjoyed that. That was a good day out, and say well worth a trip if anybody else does it. And the last thing I've done, and this is very useful for when I talk to Chris on the radio, because he always passes, I don't know how he works it out, but he always passes the over back to me just as I approach a big roundabout.
Hidden camera, Martin.
Yeah, hidden camera. It has to be, because you always manage to catch me just so I'm approaching a big roundabout. I've now got hands-free in my car. So I bit the bullet the other day and I built one of my hands-free units and installed it in the car, and it works quite well. So, yeah, that and working a few people on the local UHF repeaters has been pretty much what I've been up to. So I think we've all been pretty busy.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. So
Yeah. Martin, if I can just jump in with one comment to the listeners, as this will be released the weekend before Friedrichshafen, any listeners that actually spot either Martin or myself at Friedrichshafen, please come up and say hello. We might even record you.
Yeah.
Or Chris, sorry, yes, Chris as well. And we hopefully might put some of that into a future show. If we can meet some of the listeners, that would be very nice.
Yeah.
I guess it'll be in our orange polo shirts, yeah?
I would guess so. We've got them, haven't we?
We've got them.
I'll be either in an orange one or a blue one. What's the blue one? I'm not saying anything. You'll find out when I get there.
I think I know what your blue one is.
I'll try and wear the orange one when I'm going around with Martin and Chris.
All right. Chris and I do have blue ICQ shirts as well, but that's a long story.
They're not as obvious as the orange ones.
The obvious ones. So look out for us if you are at Friedrichshafen. We'd love to talk to you. We're the same as you guys. We're amateurs, and be nice to get your feedback into our programs and find out that. So and don't try and ask Mrs. B any technical questions. She's there as my production assistant. She's there to push the record button on the recorder. So
and from what we've heard to say to you, stop messing around and buy it.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Did I use a naughty word? Do I have to cut it out?
No.
Yeah. So she'll be good. She'll be good. She's a good laugh, but she's also a bit of a wind-up merchant. So you've been warned, guys. Right, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining me tonight. I'd like to thank Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH.
Yeah, cheers, guys. It's been fun as usual.
Yeah, Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us, Dan. It's always a pleasure. Mr. Ed Durrant, DD5LP.
Yep, as always, an enjoyable evening.
Yeah, and I'll catch up with you week after the podcast is released in Germany, mate.
Yep.
And thanks to Mr. Martin Rothwell for bailing me out yet again after my internet connection has been killed at home.
Are you going to name and shame the internet provider?
It's not.
He doesn't know. Okay.
I do know that.
You don't know if you want to name and shame. Okay, well, it's always a pleasure, mate. You're always very welcome. You know that.
Yeah. So, it was a bit of a worry when I was talking to Phil on Monday. I was saying we got an interesting. Trying to get this out. He said, does that mean there won't be a podcast? And I said, no, there'll always be a podcast. There will always be something.
Look, at the end of the day, Martin, you've got the Wi-Fi password in your laptop. Yeah. If you get really stuck, just come and park on the front drive. Even if I'm not here, just park on the front drive. You'll get Wi-Fi out.
Yeah. So we're all sorted. So I'd like to say 73s, guys.
73.
73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
Now it's time to have a look at the news in brief from me, Colin M6BOY. And we start with news in America that the FCC have announced their new head of the Enforcement Bureau. And that is going to be a Rosemary C. Harold, who is returning to the FCC as they head up the Enforcement Bureau and to be the chief of that department. Ms. Harold is an attorney with considerable experience both within the agency and in private practice, as well as a former journalist. Chairman Pai says the agency has a critical role to play in enforcing the law to protect consumers and support competition in the communications marketplace. And Enforcement Bureau has been getting back on track in recent months, and he's confident that Rosemary's abilities to continue his progress. His enforcement efforts must be governed by the facts and the law, and Rosemary's experience and expertise will help us conduct sound investigations and craft legal, sustainable enforcement actions. This is especially important when it comes to the FCC's priorities, like protecting customers and consumers against illegal robocalls and confronting unlawful interference with broadcast licenses. And he greatly appreciates Rosemary's willingness to serve the FCC. So say Rosemary has quite a career beforehand. She's worked for a law firm, Wilkinson Barker Connor, where she was a partner there, and so she's also spent time as a legal advisor and a journalist, legal advisor to then FCC Commissioner Robert McDowell for media and broadband issues. So quite a varied career she has as well, and worked with C-SPAN as well in the States, which is quite a mainstream journalistic output there. So best of luck there to Miss Harold in her new role, and hopefully she'll help the amateur radio community to ward off any interference for our part of the hobby. In Norway, they're continuing to shut down the FM networks. In June, P4 and Radio Norway shut down their transmitters in Telemark, Buskerud, Hedmark and Oppland, following the public broadcaster NRK's decision to turn off their transmitters back in April. Later on in June, NRK shut down their FM broadcasters in covering Oost-Agder, Vest-Agder, Roderland, Orderland and Sogn-og-Fjordane, I think it's pronounced. P4 and Radio Norway continue to broadcast in those areas until mid-September, but I say they're continuing their shutdown from there. This is following on from the Norwegian Parliament's decision previously that major cities will no longer have access to FM transmissions for the fear that they might take listeners from NRK and other national channels. There is still a large majority of local national stations in Norway transmit on FM, roughly around about 200 local radio stations that have licenses to continue until the end of the year. So we've got a link to an industry piece on that, so if you want more information about what's happening with the FM broadcasts, this is probably also going to roll out through Europe, knowing these type of things. We've got a link on the ICQpodcast.com website. And over the previous couple of months, the Brandmeister brand of DMR radio have had a master server on test in Ireland, which they've now made public. Brandmeister is a very popular decentralized network of master servers for digital DMR, like I say, and very popular with amateur radio operators. So we've got links to this project on the ICQpodcast.com website, so check that out, guys, if that's something that you guys work with. Well, now we head over to our features episode, which is a feature on simple hands-free kit for your mobile. As always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now, what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast. Hi guys, for this episode's feature I wanted to talk about how to make a simple hands-free option for your mobile rig. Now, starting off, let's be honest about it, if you don't have the constructional skills, if you're not good with the soldering or making things, then obviously there are commercially available devices, but they will cost you more than making it for yourself, and you won't have half as much fun. If you undertake this project, you do so at your own risk. I take no responsibility for your actions, and I'm offering you no warranty if you damage your rig. But with a bit of care, you should be able to do this without any problems. Now, I've made a number of these devices, and effectively, you don't need all the functionality of, say, the fist mic, in my opinion. For argument's sake, I've made these for Yaesu, ICOM and Alinco, and at the moment I've got to make another one for a Motorola rig, so you know they are quite very useful devices to have, and certainly make your driving more enjoyable when you're operating hands-free and not fiddling with a fist mic, and less likely to get stopped by friends in the police force. So I don't see any reason why you couldn't make this for any other type of manufacturer of radio. The same principles follow all the way through. Now, you could emulate all the functionality that's on the PTT mic, but quite honestly, I think up and down channels and some of the other little functions you get, you can do that from the main control of the radio. When you're driving, pretty much all you need is a PTT, and that's it, because you set your channels, or maybe you're on a repeater, and you fire off your PTT and talk, and then switch it off and listen. So I'd pretty much say this is why this is a simple hands-free kit. Now, getting started, what do you need to get started? Well, you've got to find out about the microphone socket on the front of your rig. How it's wired is important, because if you don't know that, you've got not a hope in hell of making one of these devices. However, if you've lost your manual, you can often get manuals online. A lot of the big manufacturers post PDFs of their manuals online, so you can download the manual and have a look. And the microphone wiring always seems to be in most manufacturers' manuals, so you shouldn't have too much problems finding out how the microphone's wired. If, as I say, you can't find that, then just do a search for the particular microphone. You've got the model of microphone, and often you can find out how it is connected when it's connected to a particular radio. Now, from that point on, you then need to work out which type of socket you've got on the front of your radio. Now, there's various types. There's the round type with pins, of which you'll have to get a plug and you'll have to solder the wires onto. You may be very, very lucky, and a lot of radios have them, is an RJ45 connector on the front of the radio. And if you're lucky and have an RJ45 connector on the front of the radio, all you need to do is buy a computer patch lead or you may have one kicking around your junk box. Cut it to the desired length, cut one end off so you've got it to desired length, and the patch cable can plug into your radio, and you just take the relevant wires you want into the hands-free device you're making. If not, have a look on the internet for your connectors you want. I'm sure that you'll find them, but the RJ45 is the easiest one to do. Now, parts required for this device, and I've put down that most of them should be available in your junk box. These are all sort of things that most of us hold on to, but you should be able to make one of these for less than £10 or around about $12, something like $12, $15. And I put down here the first part, a 2K2 half watt resistor. Now, I'm not really convinced that if it was 2K7 it would be a problem, but somewhere around about 2K2 will be ideal. A 0.1 capacitor, and the 0.1 capacitor, minimum working voltage of 25 volts, and most of them are much, much higher values than that. A 470 puff capacitor, picofarad capacitor, equally 25 volts all working. A switch to be used for PTT, an optional push button which you can put across the PTT in parallel with it to make quick contacts if need be, a small piece of PCB, the strip board stuff. Now that could be used, or depending on how you decide to make it, you may decide to make it dead bug style, or you may also decide just to do point-to-point wiring and epoxy it or something. This is your choice. A small plastic box to house the components in, once again optional. If you fit a PTT switch up into the dashboard of your car, you might mount all the components behind it, and effectively you wouldn't need to have a plastic box. I used a cheap computer microphone. And in fairness, you used to be able to buy these in the pound shop for £1, and they're perfectly okay. We have their limitations, but they're perfectly okay, and they're dirt cheap. The last thing you need is plugs and a little bit of wire, and we'll come on to that. Now, don't forget the PTT stands for push to talk. Now, the first thing you're going to also need to know is, how are these computer microphones wired up? When you get one in the packet that's supposed to connect to your computer, the standard computer microphone uses a 3.5mm stereo jack plug. However, it is only a mono microphone. There's only one microphone in there. They are electrac, so therefore they require power. So, how do we find out which is what? A bit of homework on my part, and we worked out that the wiring is as followed. The tip of the 3.5mm jack plug is your microphone input or your audio coming off the microphone. The ring is the supply voltage, the voltage that needs to go onto the electrack to make it work. And the sleeve, the long sleeve, is the earth connector. So it's earth for the supply and the audio coming off. So it's straightforward. Now, I'm going to try and describe this, but I'll ask Colin to put up the schematic for this, and it's not that complicated. On the front of your radio, you'll find an 8 volts. Most radios have about 8 volts coming out of the front mic socket on one pin or another. If you take that connection through a 2K2 resistor, and you need to connect that to the ring of your microphone. Now, the ring of the computer microphone. Now, I use a little bit of PCB, and I have a lead, and usually put a stereo line jack on the end for the microphone to plug into. The microphone lead, you've audio in, you need to take from the audio in and go through your 0.1 capacitor, 0.1 microfarad capacitor, and that ends up at the tip on the computer microphone. The ground lead goes straight through from the ground on your rig straight through to the ground on the mic. Between the tip and the ground, or the sleeve, you will find I put a 470 picofarad capacitor. The only reason for this is just to roll off a few of the high frequencies and get rid of any high frequencies. No point in having high frequencies on this. We don't transmit high frequencies within communications anyway. And the last lead, you'll find on your rig, it says PTT, and you take that lead through to a switch, and the other side of the switch you take to ground. So effectively, when you PTT your radio, you're effectively taking the PTT line to ground. Now, possibly a little bit difficult to visualize as I'm talking, but I'll get Colin to put the schematic up on our website, and quite honestly, it's very, very easy to make. The construction, well, I use a small piece of printed circuit board, the strip board stuff, and that really just keeps the main components neat and tidy and held together, and gives me somewhere to connect the various leads on that I've got to make the connections to the microphone or to the front panel of the radio. So that all ties it nice and close together. Now, if you're not good at soldering, you can always remove every other track on the PCBs, these strip boards. So if you've got the strip boards, in the olden days they were much bigger tracks and much, much wider. Now they're quite thin, and the 0.1 can be that if you're not very good at soldering, you can get solder splashes and shorts, and then you get yourself into all sorts of difficulties. If you find that, an easy way around it is to effectively remove every other track. Now, by removing every other track, you decrease the capacitance between the tracks, so that's a good thing anyway. But it also stops you having these short circuits. Now, how do you remove the tracks easily? Well, the easiest way I've found is at the edge of the board, just run some solder onto the edge of the board on the track that you wish to remove, and just let it get nice and warm. Not enough to burn the board, but just nice and warm. And then take your soldering iron off, and with a craft knife, and not letting the solder get absolutely ice cold, but just so the board's warm, just slip your craft knife under the solder, and it'll lift the copper track off. Once you've got the copper track lifted, you can then take your fingers, hold it, and just slowly peel the copper track off. If you don't slowly do it, you'll snap the copper track, and then you'll have to go again at doing the same functionality of heating, putting a blob on, using a craft knife, and going through the motion again. But with a bit of care, you can remove every other track, and that makes it easier for people that are not very good at soldering, because that way they won't get any short circuits. So I tend to mount all of the devices on a little printed circuit board, little strip board, and there's only 2 capacitors, a resistor, and the connections to the PTT switch. And effectively, say the microphone end, as I said once before, I take the 3 wires out to a stereo jack socket rather, and the other side, which is coming from the radio, comes in from the lead that I told you about earlier, usually an RJ45, and you just work out which pins you need and connect them to the relevant point on the printed circuit board. And I tend to take a little plastic box, and it can be anything really, it doesn't have to be monstrous, and you just mount it in your car. In my case, I usually mount it on the gear shift, and you can do that quite easy by drilling a few holes in the plastic box, putting cable ties in it, and then just cable tying the device to the gear shift. And when you want to PTT, you just flick the switch, and away you go. There is an option, and I talked earlier, you could put a push button in parallel with your main switch for PTTing, and with that, pushing the button will allow you to have a quick QSO or just pass a quick message without locking the PTT in. However, I'm lazy, and I tend to find, and I have built them like that, but I tend to find usually I flick the switch, I have my transmission, I flick the switch off, and I'm finished. So I like to keep it simple and only have one PTT switch. However, if you fancy 2 with a push button and a lock switch, then you just need to wire them in parallel. So moving on, operation. Well, mount your microphone as close as possible to you in the car. It's exactly the same as using a fist mic. If you hold the fist mic at arm's length, your audio is very weak and wishy-washy, and it picks up a lot of noise. So mount your microphone as close as possible to you. Now I find just above the door, the driver's door, you'll find there's usually a handle for you to get in, and somewhere around about there you can usually mount your microphone, and that means it's no more than about 3 or 4 inches from your head, and it picks up and works very, very well. The only thing you might find is wind noise. When you're driving down the road, you may have to shut the window, but that's the same with any hands-free kit, so that's not such a problem. And once again, PTTing, well, you flick the switch on, you have your conversation, you switch it off. It makes driving that much more enjoyable because you're not fumbling with a fist mic. You're not being caught for doing things illegally or driving without due care and attention. And it makes your life a lot safer. So I think, all in all, it's a very good little project to build. Now, I said with the construction, most of these things are available in your junk box. And I would be surprised, if you haven't got most of them. If you haven't, I would suggest it's going to cost you less than £10 to do this. And it's a project that you can build quite quickly and cheaply, and it will give you years of service and enjoyment while you're driving. So all in all, maybe I've gone a long way round telling you about this hands-free device. I've built a number of them. They're very, very useful, and I hope they give you as much enjoyment using them as I get when I use it. And don't forget, I'll get Colin to put the schematic, what I use, up on their website if you can't visualise what I've been saying. And a quick look at it and you go, well, that's simple. Why haven't I done that myself before? So I hope this was of interest.
Well, guys, I hope you really enjoyed Martin's feature on his homemade simple hands-free kit for your mobile radio. As always, we'd ask you to contribute either by adding your comments on the ICQ podcast page for the episode, or drop us an email through the contact page on the ICQpodcast.com website. Always great to get your feedback of what we thought of our show. We'd like to thank Andy Zulu Sierra 5 Charlie Echo Yankee from Durban, South Africa. Our anonymous donor, and Miles Victor Echo 7 Foxtrot Sierra Romeo for their donations and helping to keep this show advert free. As always, guys, anything you can send our way is always greatly appreciated. Pop along to icqpodcast.com/donate. And as I say, anything you send our way is very greatly appreciated and keeps the show advert free. No feedback this episode on the emails for the show, but as mentioned, guys, feel free to get in touch. But I know, Dad, you had a interesting contact earlier in the week, which you wanted to mention.
Yes, certainly did, and I mentioned it in the news roundtable. Had a long conversation with Philip Stevenson, K0PWS. A really good conversation with Philip. So said I'd mention you, Philip, and Philip's a long-term listener, so nice to have you on board. And yeah, we appreciate the comments you made. But it's always willing for me to have a chat with listeners. It's quite nice to chat to them. And say, it was a good one. And I'm sorry I had to get away, Philip. But as I say, maybe we'll catch up with you again on Echo Link or Fusion, as I caught up with you this time. So that was a good one. So there you go, Colin.
Yeah, that's your local repeater's got that Fusion network built into it. Am I right in thinking that?
You're dead right, son. And yeah, it's been effectively switched on into the UK group. And most mornings, just after 9 o'clock, between 9 and 5:30, I'm often on. Not most of next week because I'm off to Friedrichshafen, but most weeks I am. So
cool. And what's the call sign again of that repeater?
GB3XP.
So GB3XP, that's the one to listen out to there. And to say, I know also Martin Rothwell and Chris Howard are very local to that one as well, so you may catch those guys out as well on that repeater. Say for you tune into that one at various times throughout the day. So just let you know from there, guys. Well, as always, you can keep up to date in everything that happens over the next fortnight between now, obviously, and the next show. By the ICQ podcast website. Sign up for the newsletter to be kept updated with the latest news stories that are going on the website. Also, our Facebook group and Facebook page are places you can get in contact with us there. Our Twitter handles for both of us, at M1RB for Martin and at Colin Butler for me, and also LinkedIn profiles as well for our presenters as well. So lots of ways of keeping in touch with everybody in the meantime. So yeah, I think that's it. Oh, and one last one as well. We've now also started publishing the ICQ podcast episodes to YouTube as well. Just again, another opportunity of you of getting your favourite amateur radio show by another channel. They are the audio shows uploaded to YouTube. But again, if that was a way you would prefer to receive the ICQ podcast, it's now there for you to listen to the show via YouTube going forward. So just another way of getting it. And I think our direct link is youtube.com/ICQ podcast, if I remember rightly. So that would definitely get there, or just a search for ICQ podcast on YouTube should find, say, those shows and those episodes there going forward. Well, I think that just about wraps up this episode number 241. Our next episode will coincide with our 9th birthday of the ICQ podcast. So we'll be getting ready there for that in the meantime. And it's also Friedrichshafen as well, isn't it, in the next fortnight as well, Dad, which I know you'll be there along with Chris Howard and Ed Durrant. So anybody who sees the famous orange ICQ t-shirts going around Friedrichshafen, feel free to say hi to the guys. And more importantly, if you see Mum with her orange t-shirt on, she likes a cup of tea and a chocolate biscuit, guys. So see what you can do to keep her happy. I'm sure that anyone who sees you in Friedrichshafen, come along, give you a shout. And as I say, you'll be more than happy to see him, won't you?
Of course we will. And in some ways, I think it's sometimes more interesting talking to our listeners and people that are interested. Yes, I am interested in seeing some of the exhibitors. But, as I say, it's very nice talking to our listeners, which is always good fun. And, yeah, we're down there, orange T-shirts as well. And your mum, Mrs. B, won't be able to answer amateur radio questions. So don't ask her what she thinks of the latest rig or whatever. But she'll be along with me, and I think she'll enjoy the show. She can be a bit of a wind-up merchant, can't she, Colin?
Yeah, very true, very true. So, in case she tells you anything, she does like tea, a little bit of milk, no sugar, and chocolate biscuits. But if she tells you anything else other than that, she's winding you up. So just to let you guys know. Right, that wraps this episode up. Episode 241 is wrapped up there now, guys. Enjoy your operating over the next fortnight. Enjoy the hobby, and as always, guys, we're doing this in a fortnight's time for you. 73 Zil.
73.
Treasel.
73.
Treasel.
73.
Treasel.
73.
Treasel.
73.
Treasel.
73.
Treasel.
73.